First, I just want to make a personal note to thank all of you for being with us tonight from the various congregations that are a part of this partnership. We, at one time or another, have lived with one another. The Methodists and the Lutherans first, and then the Westlake Korean Community Church lived with the Lutherans back in Westlake, and so we're still one big happy family. We're grateful to be together, and I think during seasons like this, which are seasons of great unity, Lent was one of the first seasons of the church that it's fitting for us to be together in the season of Lent and Easter to celebrate these central acts of our salvation that we share with one another beyond doctrines and denominations and anything else that might split us apart. So I'm grateful for your partnership. I'm 10 days into having the flu. I'm past the flu, but the flu's not done with me apparently, so I'm just going to sweat it out up here. So you're all fine. I'm not contagious. I was guaranteed last week I stopped being contagious, but I'm breathing and sweating. So when I fall over, then the nurse comes up. That's it. So I'll just hold on. So everybody, it's all going to be all right. All right. I'll have a very messy ash cross by the end of the evening, I'm sure. Well, I think you'll think this is true. You know, moms everywhere have shooed children away from treats and snacks as they prepared a supper feast with these words. See if your mom used these words. You don't want to spoil your appetite. Anybody get that one? Nothing. Never got that one? Never got that one? You don't want to spoil your dinner. You don't want to spoil your appetite. What that means, of course, is that there's something better. There's something more delicious, more sumptuous, probably healthier, and maybe even a bigger feast than what you were about to enjoy. The filler before the thing that is really filling. You don't want to spoil your appetite. Now, if you think about that, that could really be the meaning behind all the disciplines of Lent as well. You don't want to spoil your appetite. Now, we fill ourselves, don't we, with trivialities. We often are ruining our appetites, especially the appetites of our spiritual lives. Not that there's anything wrong with most of the things that we enjoy in our lives and that we fill our lives with. Okay, Doritos, Boyd, maybe you should cut back a little bit on the Doritos. I'm so glad you were here. I was planning, who am I going to insult with that joke? Boyd, you made my day by being here. Thank you. The devious nature is not in and of the things themselves. You know? What's wrong isn't the nature of what we choose to satisfy ourselves with. No, they're not evil things usually. The devious part is that they satisfy us so well that we're no longer hungry for real things. So we are filled with relatively satisfying things so that there's not enough room for ultimate things, the things that connect us to God, to one another, and to our truest beloved self. Leo Tolstoy said, materialists mistake what limits life for life itself. You might need to think about that for a second. Materialists mistake what limits life for life itself. Perhaps it drives the point better the other side. Dostoevsky, how about this one? Every ant knows the formula of the anthill. Every bee knows the formula of its beehive. They know it in their own way, not in our way. Only humankind does not know its formula. We satisfy our lusts with promiscuous behavior and pornography, and so that often there's not enough room anymore for real relationships or real intimacy because we've already filled ourselves up already. And often we've altered our desires and our appetites, disordered ideas about who real men are or real women are. Filled with the Doritos of fantasy and lust, we forget desire is an awareness of greater need than the thing we're often filling ourselves with. We satisfy our sense of security. Think about how you satisfy your sense of security. Like popping chocolates, retirement funds, money, property, power, technology. So when ultimate questions of our personal fate are finally front and center to us, we have no resource to which to turn. Our usual systems have so satisfied us that we've neglected to ask, if these things can actually cover every contingency, like illness and death? And they cannot. Why have you spoiled your appetite with filler? The call to follow Christ is to hunger for real things, for eternal things, to develop a desire for those things. Now, this is a strange and countercultural practice that we invite you into tonight. It's why the world hasn't shown up at our doors. You know, they do show up at Easter still sometimes, but not on Ash Wednesday, never on a Monday, Thursday, rarely on a Good Friday. These are countercultural invitations that we're making to you tonight. A way that our world often keeps as a too-hidden road, the way of disciplined and reordered desires, a way of abstaining and fasting, not to spoil our appetite for the feast that God is going to bring us. The psalmist said, one of my favorite psalms, "As the deer longs for water brooks, so my soul longs after you. You, O Lord, are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you." You know that one? Psalm, I think it's 42, I want to say. When we take seriously the psalmist's point about worship, we're invited to see whether or not we have our lives disordered. As a deer longs for water, so my soul longs for you, O Lord. My heart's desire, and I long to worship you. Worship is the word from the Old English. It's worth-ship. Worth-ship. A thing to which we ascribe true worth, real importance, even ultimate value. As important as water is to a thirsty deer, as important as to a water is to a thirsty human being, so important ought to be the matter of God in human life. But sadly, it's just not always the case. How do we then, who visit these rituals, this is our thing. I know most of you in the room from all various congregations. I know you guys are regulars. That's who comes in these nights. It's the regulars, this is Cheers, or everybody knows your name, This is that group, So the question becomes, how do we shake off the blinders of things that satisfy only far enough to subdue our senses? How do we shake off the blinders of the things that satisfy only far enough to subdue our senses? How do we awaken the immediacy of our spiritual appetites in the world that has seemingly eliminated those appetites? Well, Lent is the prescription that the ancient church has given us. Lent. And I think there's no better time in our history to have Lent. In a time like this, I think it's important to take the call more seriously. As Walt said, blow a trumpet. I was really hoping he was going to blow it out there like a trumpet. Blow a trumpet! Proclaim a fast! The importance of what the prophet was calling his people, the discipline in order to reorder our lives, because most of our lives are pretty disordered. We intentionally, in this season, invite some hardship. New Hope in this season, we're going to talk about being invited into wilderness. That's what this whole mess and menagerie up here is. Why are they bringing weeds into their sanctuary? Wilderness, invitation into wild places, the places that we typically avoid going. But instead, this year, we're going to go to them with Jesus. There's nothing like an arduous adventure to bond adventurers together. The very place of wilderness, danger, hardship become the places of inspiration, validation, and life. If you've ever taken a hard journey, you know the contours of that truth, that you are bonded together with those who pilgrim with you. Jesus called it the way of the cross. The way of the cross is to live a life seeking out God's purposes over our own and taking God-driven detours and back ways on the redemption journey. The willingness to follow him into the thicket, to find his lambs, and out on the ledges to save his sheep. And this journey is filled with surprises and resurrections and new vistas of what life really is. Fulton Sheen, and this is a quote on the screen, so you want to turn it forward. When we die to something, something comes alive within us. If we die to self, charity comes alive. If we die to pride, service comes alive. If we die to lust, reverence for personality comes alive. If we die to anger, love comes alive. All along the way of our journey of the cross, we find that it is the great shepherd who holds us secure time and time again if we are willing to do the arduous journey of following him to Lent and letting go of the illusions that usually are the things that secure us, like money, wealth, and power. They don't save, at least not ultimately. Christ saves. Christ saves ultimately from sin and death, but Christ also saves from the brokenness of sin, the disordering of our lives by the filler that we put into our thinking that's real stuff. Well, what's some of that look like? Well, it's the meanness that we have from time to time. Anybody got some meanness? Anybody not got some meanness? Because you're my new best friend. Or the divisive space that we put between people, in our lives, thinking that, well, that's the best way to preserve ourselves. That's the best way to preserve our relationships. Really? Or that tit-for-tat behavior that we get into with people, in the cubicle. They put stuff into your side, and put stuff into their side, The subtle digs that we use against others, and we practice thinking that somehow these things will increase our humor and our grace. The encampments that we love to have right now, with the like-minded that we create, thinking that it makes us safer in a big, diverse world. The silence and resistance that we practice that we think will lead miraculously to better community. The gluttonies that we all entertain, believing that they won't end in personal or relational disaster. What's the worst that could happen? All these Doritos? I'm not going to end up at the cardiologist. Lord, save us from the junk food that fills us so that we never hunger for your real life and for dignity and real community and faith and hope and love of God, of neighbor, and of our truest beloved self. In a time like ours, in 2020, for crying out loud, in a world like ours, isn't it time to proclaim a fast? Isn't it time that we heeded the clarion call of our risen Savior to follow him from death into life? Or to use the metaphor of moms everywhere, to ask ourselves, please, stop spoiling your appetite with junk. Something better is coming, and we should be shaped by and saved for the Easter forever world, or as the book of Revelation describes it, the feast of the Lamb that never ends. So friends, don't spoil your appetites on fillers, but keep it with a holy Lent. Amen.